Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into an absolutely fascinating chapter of natural history and magical law. We're going to be looking at the life of Elyra Veyr, historically known as the Fourfold Mistress, and her absolutely crucial role in maintaining the very calendar of our world. As we dig into our life's work, you're going to see that understanding Elyra isn't just about the weather. It's really about uncovering the deep structural laws of rhythm that govern our entire world, and seeing exactly how she used those laws to defend the realm against the stagnant, absolute control of demonic crowns.
So, what actually happens when a dark force decides that the natural cycles of life are just too unpredictable and literally tries to freeze the great wheel of time forever? This right here is the central conflict we're exploring today. You see, the demonic crowns didn't just want to conquer the land. They wanted to conquer time itself. They wanted to replace the natural, beautiful rhythm of birth, growth, release, and rest with an endless, unnatural tyranny. And to stop them, Elyra Veyr had to do something incredible. She had to turn the very concept of a calendar into a weapon.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll establish the fundamental law of natural rhythms. Then, we'll look at the specific threat of endless tyranny posed by those demonic crowns. Third, we'll break down the 4 distinct archetypes of defense Elyra learned from her teachers. Fourth, we'll examine some real-world case studies of how she combated corruption. And finally, we'll analyze her master strategy of timing.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the Law of Natural Rhythms and Understanding the Great Wheel.
To really grasp Elyra's strategy, we have to contrast what her enemies wanted with the fundamental laws of nature. The old masters understood that the seasons aren't just weather, they are governing laws of rhythm. Nature demands rhythm, it demands adaptation, and through that adaptation, it actually preserves freedom. It shifts the wind, it changes the light. Demonic crowns, on the other hand, absolutely despise the seasons, because seasons deny absolute control. The false rhythm of darkness prefers a single mood stretched out for eternity. Think endless hunger, endless heat, endless grief. It's basically a mechanical, clockwork tyranny compared to the organic breath of the natural world. Which brings us right into Section 2, the threat of endless tyranny and the broken calendar. Elyra's first major trial went down in a lowland town called Marrowglass, and it perfectly illustrates how insidious demonic corruption really is. Imagine a town totally out of whack. Peach trees blooming and then freezing in the dead of winter, wheat ripening way before the roots even formed, just chaos. Elyra found the oldest almanac and traced the timeline of the wound. Every seasonal sign had shifted. First by 13 days, then 21, then 40. Something was literally dragging time out of rhythm. Well, she found the culprit hidden inside a brand new clock tower, a demonic crown made of iron thorns. It didn't control the weather, it controlled expectation. It warped the town's rhythm so completely that even the fields started to doubt themselves. Now, Elyra didn't just smash the clock. Violence just scatters time curses. Instead, she silenced the bell, gathered objects from all 4 seasons, and let the natural, sequence-bound pressure of the real seasons turn that dark crown into ordinary rust. Now, Elyra wasn't born with full mastery over all this. Natural power tests you. It humbles you. So when she was 15, her mother sent her away to learn from 4 distinct teachers, one for each season. This brings us to Section 3, 4 archetypes of defense and the teachers of the turning year. First up, spring. Elyra learned from Mistress of the Green Door, a healer living in a ruined fortress. And what Mistress taught Elyra is absolutely crucial. Spring is not about softness. It is about immense, unstoppable pressure.
It's the force where a tiny, sleeping root can split solid stone. It is literally a force that breaks darkness.
Think about it like this. As a tactical defense, spring is the sheer audacity to begin again, even after absolute proof of suffering. Demonic forces rely heavily on despair, right? They want to convince the wounded that nothing new can ever grow. So, Elyra used spring to terrifying effect by weaponizing sequence over instant gratification. For example, in the city of Varan Hall, a demonic preacher declared that hope was childish, which caused citizens to literally lock themselves away in despair. Elyra didn't fight him with fire. She simply touched every closed door with a bit of willow bark, awakening the memory of one unfinished thing inside every single person. A letter they hadn't sent, a garden they hadn't planted. By evening, the doors opened. Spring counters despair by simply initiating the sequence of life.
Moving into the intense heat of summer, Elyra learned from a wandering haymaker named Borun Sunback. Summer is arguably the most dangerous power because it expands so rapidly. Borun taught her that true summer is generosity, but strictly under discipline. As a defensive trait, summer is basically fire held inside a fruit. Its sweetness produced by heat, sure, but it's protected by skin and seed. Too much sun, and the land just burns into drought and greed. Demons love endless summer because they want heat to become a feverish lust for conquest. Elyra mastered the profound discipline of stopping. During the terrible siege of Lornbridge, she breathed warmth through dried lavender to strengthen exhausted, sleepless soldiers. But she specifically calibrated it. She gave them just enough warmth to return their memories of warm kitchens and sleeping children. They fought to protect life, not because they had been whipped up into a savage fever for battle. Then we have Autumn. Her teacher here was Sava Redleaf, an old judge who literally held court beneath a giant chestnut tree. Sava taught Elyra that autumn is the ultimate season of truth. It's that moment when the leaves fall, the hidden fruit is finally counted, and the masks wear thin. Tactically speaking, autumn functions as the act of loosening attachments and removing what can no longer feed life. Demons trap people by making them clinging to false beauty or expired power or old debts. Elyra used what she called autumn eyes in the court of King Halvin. A demonic advisor had practically ruled there for 7 years through pure flattery, making the king see a younger, stronger version of himself in every mirror. Elyra just walked right in wearing a cloak of leaves. When she simply looked at the room with those autumn eyes, the flattering illusions entirely collapsed. The advisor's beautiful robes shed like bark, revealing stolen contracts and the frightened face of a minor demon. Autumn defeats corruption by proving that keeping dead leaves is suffocation, not loyalty. And finally, we reach winter. Elyra's teacher here was a nameless shepherd up on a mountain pass who only spoke when snow covered his boots. He taught her something beautiful. Winter is not death. It is a necessary locked door.
So tactically, winter is the creation of a boundary. It hardens the roads, it kills off the pests, and it preserves the seed deep underground. It provides a room where grief can just exist without being constantly chased away. When facing the crown of endless winter in Narsk Hollow, a demon that ruled through absolute spiritual numbness and isolation, Elyra didn't attack with a sudden flood of summer heat. That would have just drowned the weakened people. Instead, she fought it with sequence. She started with a single spring sound, dripping water. Drops falling into clay bowls for 7 days, slowly entering their dreams, reminding people of rivers. Winter as a natural defense is really about the mercy of stopping, holding the boundaries safe until spring is actually strong enough to answer.
All right, let's look at how she actually used this stuff in the field. Section 4. Case studies in combating corruption and practical applications of rhythm.
Take the Ashwood border restoration, for example. Demonic fire had literally burned a forest down to gray ribs. The survivors were desperate. They begged Elyra for an instant miracle grove, but she flat out refused. Instead, she pressed her palm to the soot and asked the soil what it wished to live. Ferns came first, then mushrooms. She taught the villagers this strict sequence. First, cover the soil. Second, feed the insects. Third, invite the birds. Fourth, let the shade teach the ground how to stay wet. Haste had made them vulnerable to demonic promises in the first place, you see. By enforcing sequence and patience, she totally immunized the soil and the people against future corruption.
Or how about the Brackenford boundary dispute? This is a wild story. Two families were armed to the teeth, ready to slaughter each other over a boundary stone, and a demonic crown was actively feeding on the feud. Elyra walked right between the armed camps and dropped a winter shadow without snow. The ground instantly hardened like iron. Why? So no one could quickly dig a fresh grave. The swords grew ice cold in their hands. She literally stopped the heat of their anger, creating this profound, unavoidable silence. And in that silence, the oldest members of the family started remembering shared kindnesses from decades past. Winter didn't solve the quarrel directly, but it created a room where the heat couldn't keep lying. The boundary stone was eventually moved into a shared orchard, and that observing demonic crown, it simply starved to death. Which brings us to the grand finale, Section 5, the master strategy of timing and defeating the crown of all times.
So, the demonic crowns finally realized Elyra couldn't be beaten by a single element. So what do? They initiate the War of the Shattered Year, breaking the calendar at the solstices and equinoxes. To heal it, Elyra brought together all the natural masters under the seasonal accord, perfectly countering the demonic imbalance. Spring's rooting counters their despair. Summer's sharing counters the fever of conquest. Autumn's release defeats decay. Winter's boundary cures isolation. Her whole strategy dismantles tyranny by continually asking one devastatingly simple question. What time is it, truly?
It all culminated in this epic showdown at the ancient standing stones of Elyra Veyr. The demon known as the Crown of All Times rises up, wearing 4 twisted masks of extreme, unbalanced seasons. It throws endless, unfinished beginnings at her, then limitless heat, then overwhelming rot, and finally freezing despair. But Elyra realized something profound. Fighting force with force would just create another tyranny. So, against its winter attack, she didn't fight back at all. She became completely still. She embodied the quiet, sequence-bound potential of a tiny seed. Beneath her silence, all 4 seasons waited in perfect, unshakable balance. When the demon looked at her, it didn't see a victim trapped in winter. It saw a seed ready to begin again. That realization, that natural sequence literally cannot be broken, completely shattered the crown of all times. And you know what the best part? Elyra hated being called a goddess or a queen. She always insisted, "I am not the seasons. I am only one listener standing near the wheel." Her final recorded act beautifully illustrates this humility. During an equinox tide, with the sea totally confused between spring birds and winter seals, she didn't cast some massive flashy spell. She just walked out to the tide line, planted a single apple seed, and placed 4 different colored leaves over it. She sang a tone that embodied all 4 seasons together. And the tide? It simply chose its proper rhythm again. She was the guardian of timing, proving once and for all that no darkness can own the whole year.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer, and I want to leave you with a question. Elyra's teachings remind us that so many evils begin as an imbalance pretending to be a solution. Endless growth, endless rest, endless holding on. We all have this tendency to want to freeze time when things are good, or to try and fast forward through it when things are hard. But nothing living is meant to remain unchanged forever. So where in your own life might you be resisting the natural rhythms of the wheel? Where are you clinging to autumn leaves, or demanding summer fruit in the dead of winter? Think on that, and whatever you do, respect the rhythm.